That's right. Now we're getting ourselves ready for game number one. Like we mentioned, quad question marks squaring off against Echo, our number one seed. Let's get into it in Halls of Atonement.
All right, so we see Echo versus quad question mark here. We see two different rounds already. We see but huge pulls coming in by both of the teams. Echo pulling everything to this left side over. It looks like they pulled 2 shards together. So this is 2 shards and all of the mobs in between. Huge amounts of damage coming in by this double thrash being casted.
Yeah, and I want to see also how much trash percentage this is going to be, because this is actually a crazy amount of trash, like you already mentioned. But look at the damage coming out of that Fire Mage with Combust and Power Infusion there, easily popping up over 50k over this course of this entire pull. And you can really see for both classes, for both teams, how powerful it is. One of the major differences you're seeing as well is how strong that Venthyr Holy Paladin is over on the side of Question Mark team. Ashen Hollow does a ton of damage, especially if they pair it together with the Mad Paragon Legendary.
Yeah, huge amounts of damage coming out of that Holy Paladin for sure. Now we see a skip coming in by Echo. So they did spawn that Pride mob, and they finished off all of the trash mobs. There was not the Pride. And then we saw now just tanking off the Pride mob. Salia going down, but they are out of combat, so they're just using a normal rest here from Maris to get Salia back up. But yeah, they were skipping the Pride mob here by using that Shadow Melt. Now was off tanking it, everyone else ran away, and then now leaped onto their team and they all Shadow Melted at the same time to make sure they are de-aggroing the Pride mob and just leaving it behind.
Yep, we're probably going to see that a lot throughout this entire competition. Being able to Shadow Meld those Pridefuls off is going to save you a lot of time, especially on this 18 scenario where they have probably about 500,000 HP. If you don't have to single target those down, you don't have to worry about doing a lot of damage and save a lot of time over the course of the dungeon. Also, it's not really too viable to pull that with Trash Packs unless you know you have all your cooldowns up, so look forward to seeing a lot of Shadow Melds skipping past those Pridefuls.
Yeah, and the beautiful use here of that Ring of Peace to make sure now resets at Necrotic, because we do have Necrotic in this dungeon, and it looked like it was basically non-existent here on the first pull. We do see now playing Kyrian, so he does have this Kyrian Vial available to him, which also removes the Necrotic effect, which is actually pretty handy, but probably didn't have it ready for this pull, so we saw the Ring of Peace coming out to make sure he can reset it. Very nicely done, as they are now proccing that second Pride mob, and this time they decided to finish off the Pride. They also don't have Shadow Melt available at this point in time. It's still on cooldown, so that's probably why they decided to finish it off here.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And I mean, having the Prideful for that first boss might be useful as well, because, the Tyrannical boss does take a lot of time to get through, so that might be one of the only ones we'll see them pull, or they're just going to go for another massive pull, and that 30% damage buff will help them out a lot here.
Yeah, we see one of those inspired mobs, this Houndmaster is inspired. They're just running through, taking it with them. It might... Actually, no, they incapped it, as you can see. Maris actually used one of his Hearts of Seas, the incap on that Houndmaster to make sure the inspired aura is not applied to the rest of the mobs here. So they're pulling the shard plus all of this trash together. They do have the Pride buff. That's why we see this huge amount of damage coming in by them. They just off healing the shards AoE cast, the Thrash. Usually you could outrange it, but of course they do have melee, 2 melee even, so that's not a possibility for them. So they're just out healing that damage, making sure they just AoE nuking everything down, and it looks like they're skipping this Pride and also that Houndmaster, that inspired one. So there the Shadow Melt is coming out, they're skipping that one as they're moving on to the boss. Well, on the other side, we do see a quad question mark fighting that second Pride mob as well. They do not have the option to skip this, as they have a Holy Paladin, which cannot be a Night Elf at all. So no possibility of Shadow Melting off that Pride.
Yeah, and like we mentioned earlier, that's going to be a huge time loss for them. Like, each of those probably still takes about 20 to 30 seconds, even with the gear that they have on these tournament realms. So really not great to not have Shadow Melt on every single one of your members for those. And you can see the difference here. Echo's already pulled the boss, and Question Mark team is still pretty far behind right now.
Yeah, we can now see the trash percentage as well up on the screen here in the middle. You see Echo is on 63%. They actually pulled some trash on top of this boss here. Everything is just moving so quickly for them. It's really hard to even keep up with all of this action here on their side. While quad question mark, they are on 62%. So they're just basically one pull behind. I think it's literally just the difference of the Pride mobs that they had to play, right? Because the buff that you gain from the Pride mob just does not make... It doesn't give you such a time gain that would make up for the time that you lose for finishing off the Pride itself. And it's just... inefficient for this setup here for the speed running, because they cannot really pull anything on top of the Pride mob because it's such a huge amount of damage coming out of it, and also having to dodge those abilities as well, the debuff from the Pride, and it just makes it not efficient.
Oh yeah, for sure. But the thing you can see as well is actually Team Question Mark is actually pulling ahead of Echo purely off the back of that Holy Paladin damage. The Ashen Hollow plus the Wings is just doing a ton of work for them. You can see he's even doing more damage, well, was doing more damage than their Shadow Priest for a second there as well. So huge damage from the Holy Paladin. But now that Ashen Hollow plus Wings is running out, you're seeing Echo retake the lead here and get further ahead on the boss.
Yeah, now they're dealing with the Houndmaster as well. The Houndmaster does have that inspired buff, which doesn't really matter on a boss because the boss is not seeable anyway. So they can just nuke it down for efficiency, getting a little bit extra percentage again while fighting the boss at the same time. We do have this one death still that happened earlier on Zalia. So the 5 seconds that they lost are still there, while Question Mark played really clean so far. They're now at the exact same point in the dungeon. Both 79% trash, both just finished off that boss. So it's actually Question Mark that is ahead at this point because they have the extra time, but because they have 0 deaths.
Well, the question is as well, they're going to have to deal with these Groundskeepers to proc that 4th Prideful, and they will have to kill that Prideful off before moving on to the second boss, whereas Echo can just go straight to the boss room and pull the boss once they're all Shadow Melded. So I think the Shadow Meld advantage is still helping them out here a lot, and they're going to be pretty far ahead after we get through this second boss. But it is nice to see that, you know, this meta comp isn't necessarily just 100% the best at everything. You're seeing Question Mark put up a pretty good fight here.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, this one Shadow Meld they just got there really gave them a huge advantage, as they're now already fighting Echelon, while Question Mark has to deal with this Pride, as you mentioned. Echelon itself, there's not much you can do on top of it. Like, you can't really pull any trash on top, unless you feel fancy, because the door is actually closed to the next room, so you can't pull any of the other trash back. But you could pull the previous trash, but that one is pretty difficult. That's why usually we see that trash skipped on live servers, and we also see it skipped here on the MDI, just because it seems very inefficient. It's pretty dangerous as well. We have a bunch of frontals, a bunch of casts that need to be interrupted. So usually teams choose to skip it, which we see from both teams as well here.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you can see the big difference here right now. 30% on that second boss just from having to kill the Pride off for Team Question Mark. Echo is just using this Shadow Meld strat to their advantage by a lot here, and it's going to help them out a lot in the future as well once we get past that 5th Prideful after the mini-boss later on in the dungeon.
Yeah, definitely. We do see both of them having a good amount of single target damage. Now, when it comes to the mages, they are, of course, reliant on their combustion, but because combustion can be reduced by quite a lot, the cooldown of it, they do usually have combustions for bosses and also for the trash right afterwards. So we do see the shifting power coming out of Jinji on Echo's side, while we also see a huge amount of damage from the Shadow Priest coming out for Question Mark. Shadow Priest definitely also showing that they can keep up with the damage as well. The only difference is the Shadow Priest, right, versus the Windwalker. Windwalker, though, does provide that extra physical damage for the group, but most of the damage dealers in Echo, they don't actually do that much physical damage. We see the DK, who's doing a lot of magic damage as well, and we see the Mage, of course, which does 0 physical damage. So maybe not even that advantageous to have the physical buff, compared to having the Demon Hunter, of course, which gives the magic buff, which both of the teams do have.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, the Monk is a huge advantage for them here as well. I think Munch is a much better DPS class than that Shadow Priest in general right now. A lot of their strengths this expansion early on, where they're able to stack versatility, as well as just do massive AoE damage with those spinning crank kick stacks and that Dance of Chi proc that's really powerful. This expansion is helping them out quite a bit. So the overall damage, I would not be surprised if we see at the end of the dungeon the Monk to be way higher than that Shadow Priest.
Yeah, would not be surprised about that one for sure. As the Echo did now finish off the boss, they're moving on to the next room. We do see one inspired Houndmaster again here in this room. Let's see how they deal with that one. Looks like they're just immediately pulling everything to that boss. So they're now engaging that third boss with all of the trash on top of it. This seems incredibly dangerous, not only because you have all of this trash plus the boss, but you also have the inspired aura here. So that means 2 inspired mobs, none of these ads can actually be interrupted or CC'd in any sort of way. So now it just has to tank this without any help from AoE stuns or anything like that. but it looks like he did manage to survive it just fine. He also used that Curian Vial, it looks like, to get rid of that Necrotic stack on him. And now on the other side, Quad doing this exact same pull.
For sure. It looks pretty good for them here, but man, Echo is just crushing these bosses, pulling this trash with this boss, like you mentioned. They're going insanely fast. I think the fact that they have that Shadow Priest, and I haven't checked on the gear thing, but he could be running the PI Legendary as well, which will let him PI both himself and a target, so that's one benefit of having the Shadow Priest in the group comp. That's really going to be the only major difference, because he can PI that Holy Paladin during his cooldowns and have him do a lot of damage. You can see how much the Holy Paladin is doing once again here on this poll, by the way.
Yeah.
Keeping up with the Shadow Priest. That's just the strength of the Paladin. It's just really unfortunate that they don't have access to that Shadow Meld.
Yeah, that's true. Do you actually know if the mind control from the Venthyr, if you mind control the gargoyles with the Venthyr Covenant, does that actually count towards your damage in details?
So with details, there's a little bit of a weird interaction with that. If you mind control the gargoyle out of combat, it'll show on details, but if you mind control it in combat, it doesn't show.
Okay. So they were definitely in combat when they mind controlled, so it looks like both of the damage meters did not include that gargoyle damage, so it was literally just the Paladin's damage, yeah. It wasn't any, like, gargoyle damage added to it, probably.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, people completely underestimate the damage of Paladin right now. Like, in our raids, one of our Paladins running that setup can actually do more burst damage than any other class in the game inside of a 1-minute window. It's ridiculous how much damage Holy Paladin can do with this exact setup. But it doesn't have Shadow Meld, so in the Mythic Plus MDI scenario, it really isn't going to be that much of an advantage. That being said, they are very close behind Echo right now.
Yeah, this is really close. I mean, what's going to be the difference again is this Shadow Meld, right? Because they're head-to-head here. They have the 5 seconds advantage in their favor, but they're going to be triggering that last Pride from this mini-boss, and they just won't have a way of dodging the Pride. Well, and I mean, it's very unlikely that they're going to get the advantage back from the damage buff. Of course, if you skip the Pride, then you don't have the damage buff, so you don't have that advantage. But the time that you lose for that single target damage that you have to do to the Pride is just not making up for it. At least I very highly doubt it. As they're now moving on as well into this room, it looks like they're doing the line of sight. It's not really the line of sight strategy. They're just nuking the mini-boss in between the heals. So this mini-boss casts a heal where he just channels on those neutral mobs, and depending on if there's any neutral mobs still alive, he will just gain HP back. He will just heal himself to full HP with this Dark Communion cast. But if you manage to nuke him from 100 to 0 in between the casts, then it's no problem. And it looks like both of the teams were doing that.
Yep, for sure. I mean, they're both able to pull it off, it looks like here, so that's one entire mini-boss they pretty much don't have to worry about. None of those adds in that room, they don't have to go AoE them down. But, of course, Team Question Mark will have to deal with that Prideful, but they're probably going to go for that live strat that we see a lot of high-key push teams do, where they'll just pull the Prideful with the boss and cleave it down. And it looks like that's what Fim is going to do, but he's pretty low when he goes in, but the meta is popped for him, so it looks like he's going to be just fine. That being said, Echo has already been on the boss for about 20 seconds here, so the time advantage and the boss health percentage is huge for them. We're going to have to see if Team Question Mark picking up that Prideful bus in about 20 seconds is going to help them catch up at all, though.
I mean, they might be able to. They also have the Paladin, which does increase their single target damage by quite a bit. But because of the amount of heal that Jeeth has to do on the group because of that Pride, he might not be able to do as much damage as he usually does. So that's going to be a little bit of an issue. And then they also have to dodge not only the debuffs, but also the adds. But there we go. The Pride is down. So now they can nuke the boss. And you see the damage difference. I mean, the HP difference here at the bottom. It is still really close. It is a tyrannical environment. So, of course, the difference that we have right now is a bit bigger than it would be on 45, but we still have the 5 seconds advantage for Quad Question Mark, so this can still be incredibly close.
And it also looks like they're actually catching up too, with the wings now just being popped from Jeeth here as well. Their damage is going to go up quite a bit, but the Lust is also now coming out for Echo. So, man, this is going to end up being a really close DPS race here at the end. And like you mentioned, Question Mark does have that 5-second advantage, which could easily be the 6% behind they are on the boss right now.
This is so incredibly close. It looks like Combustion for Gingy is going to come up in a second, right before the boss is going to go down. We do see Combustion just has been popped for Petco, so they're going to be a little bit ahead in burst damage here in a second once Gingy has this Combustion up. There we go, Combustion is being popped, and it looks like the boss is melting at this point. I'm not sure if Quad Crusher Mark can make up for this. This 5 seconds is probably just not going to be enough, as Lord Chamberlain is going down for Echo, and we're counting down the 5 seconds. I don't think this is going to be enough. They're just running out of damage at this point, but so close. Wow.
Covenant choice, there were some things that surprised me about it as well. For instance, you can see fragments here in this part of the dungeon where actually Echo lost the most time was when Xaylia died here. This opened up, I'd say 30 seconds that brought the game a lot closer than it otherwise might have been. But Fragments is actually their Death Knight. He's playing their Venthyr in this dungeon, not their Priest, which you might normally expect. Similarly, on the other side, both Priests in this series were playing Night Fae for those Fae Guardians, rather than playing Venthyr for the mind games and mind controlling the gargoyles. And then on this team, the Question Mark gang, Jeeth was playing their Venthyr player. As you can see, that enables the Ashen Hallow on these boss pull situations. Here comes that Ashen Hallow, pops the wings as well. And you're going to see Jeeth just role-playing as both their top damage dealer for a bit, their top healer for a bit. He's just doing the entire dungeon for them during the duration of those 30 seconds every 4 minutes of the Venthyr Ashen Hallow. And this pull, it looked really, really strong for them. But what Echo was able to make happen with this pull was at the end of this boss, after they managed to do a similarly impressive big pull at the start of it, they pulled in a piece of trash right at the end, and then they killed it right after the boss. They mounted up while the 80% Prideful was spawning, and then they did their skip and did a Shadow Meld, which the sequencing of events there is really impressive and well timed. We're gonna get to see that, I think, in just a second here in the replay. And that part of the strategy worked really, really nicely for them, and is an example of just where they were saving this time with Shadow Meld. Much as I like to talk about that, though, even though they were melding these prides, we saw the Question Marks doing the prides and really coming with a close time. I'd say that the two routes were separated by probably less than 30 seconds theoretically, which is as much as we're going to see a lot of 5 Night Elf action to make use of it here. The fact that you can just kill the Pride, Invis Pot, and then you have the Prideful for the boss, and that makes the boss faster, especially on these Tyrannical dungeons, of which all 3 in this first series have that Tyrannical affix. That brings a lot of advantages too, and I think that it is absolutely competitive, especially when you have such cooldown-oriented specs as that team did. Even every single spec on that team had those cooldowns. Here's that skip I was talking about, though. You spawn the Pride right after killing the boss, and then you can see they have the Pride active as they are getting ready to run through here, needing to make sure they're careful of that boast, the 4 direction, cardinal direction stun thing. So they're really taking their time with that skip there. That's the kind of thing you could tell it was really well practiced, well honed, and I'm sure they wiped that a couple times in practice to learn exactly how to execute that skip, get up here to Echelon, and even though they didn't have the Pride buff, that time they saved ended up making it so that when they got to this last boss, they had opened up enough of a lead to be able to overcome the cooldowns lined up with Prideful from the other team. Again, close match, very close match. A lot of great play from both teams involved here. The Necrotic just chunking those tanks, but of course, playing Kyrian, they have that Phial of Serenity to remove those bleeds at the most crucial moments in each dungeon. Extremely, extremely strong there. And that is how Echo took game 1 here.